That friend of mine once told me something I never forgot. He said that the most stressful day of his career didn't begin with a crisis. It began with silence. Everyone in the room was staring at the same problem. A project that had taken months to build had suddenly collapsed. Deadlines were falling apart. Pressure was rising quickly. You could almost feel the anxiety spreading across the room. People began reacting the way people usually do when something goes wrong. Some started explaining why the situation was terrible. Others tried to figure out who was responsible. A few people simply sat there, overwhelmed by how big the problem seemed. But then something interesting happened. My friend didn't react the way everyone else did. He didn't panic. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't start explaining why everything had gone wrong. Instead, he stayed quiet for a moment, just long enough to think. Then he asked a simple question. "All right, what's the first thing we can fix right now?" And suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Instead of staring at the size of the problem, people began focusing on the next step. The panic slowly disappeared. Action replaced it. Later that day, I asked him how he managed to stay calm when everyone else was stressed. His answer was surprisingly simple. He said, "Problems don't disappear when you panic, but solutions start appearing when you focus on them." That idea stayed with me for a long time, because the more I observed people around me, the more I realized something fascinating. Two people can face the exact same situation, the same pressure, the same obstacle, the same uncertainty. Yet their minds move in completely different directions. One person immediately feels trapped by the difficulty. Their thoughts circle around the problem. They replay what went wrong. They imagine how bad things might become. But another person does something very different. Instead of getting stuck in the size of the obstacle, their mind begins searching for possibilities. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening?" they ask something much more powerful. "What can I do next?" Over time, this difference becomes incredibly important, because success in difficult moments rarely comes from avoiding problems. Life simply doesn't work that way. Challenges appear in every career, in every relationship, in every personal journey. The real difference appears in how the mind reacts when those challenges arrive. From what I've seen in people around me, the individuals who grow the most are not the ones with the easiest lives. They are the ones who slowly train their mind to move toward solutions. And this is something very interesting about the human brain. It has a natural tendency to focus on danger, to notice risks, to analyze what might go wrong. For thousands of years, this instinct helped humans survive. But in modern life, that same instinct can quietly trap our thinking. We replay problems again and again. We analyze every mistake. We imagine outcomes that haven't even happened yet. Without realizing it, our attention becomes locked onto the problem itself. But the mind can be trained to move in another direction. It can be trained to stay calm when situations become chaotic. It can be trained to search for possibilities when others only see obstacles. It can be trained to look at problems and immediately ask a powerful question. What is the next step forward? And once this mental shift begins to happen, something remarkable changes. The problems around you may not disappear. Life will still present challenges. Unexpected situations will still appear. But the way you respond to them becomes completely different. In this audiobook, we're going to explore how this transformation happens. We will look at why the human brain naturally focuses on problems. We will explore the psychology behind calm thinking in difficult situations. And most importantly, we will discover how some people train their minds to see solutions where others only see obstacles. Because once your mind learns to move in that direction, you begin to notice something powerful. The same situations that once felt overwhelming start to look very different. Instead of feeling trapped by them, you begin finding the way through them. Chapter 1. The mental trap that keeps most people stuck in problems. The moment a problem appears, something automatic happens inside the human mind. Before logic has time to respond, before calm thinking has time to arrive, the brain begins searching for danger. This reaction is fast. So fast that most people don't even notice it happening. A small mistake at work, an unexpected expense, a disagreement with someone you care about. Within seconds, the mind begins asking questions that quietly pull attention deeper into the problem. Why did this happen? How bad is this going to become? What if things get worse? At first, these questions seem reasonable. After all, the brain is trying to understand the situation. But something subtle begins to happen when attention stays there for too long. The mind stops trying to move forward and instead it starts circling the problem. Over the years, I've noticed this pattern in many people around me. There was a colleague I once worked with who reacted to challenges in a very predictable way. Whenever something went wrong, his first reaction was almost always the same. This is going to be a disaster. Even when the issue was small, his mind immediately jumped to the worst possible outcome. He would spend long conversations explaining why the situation was terrible, why things had gone wrong, why someone else should have handled it differently. But something interesting happened during those moments. Very little time was spent asking a different question. What can we actually do about it? The more attention he gave to the problem, the heavier it seemed to become. And after watching this pattern repeat many times, I began realizing something important. The real trap people fall into is not the problem itself. It is the habit of mentally living inside the problem. The brain becomes fascinated with what went wrong. It replays the situation again and again, almost like a movie that refuses to stop playing. Psychologists have a word for this mental loop. They call it rumination. Rumination happens when the mind repeatedly returns to the same thoughts, searching for answers that no longer help. But rumination rarely produces solutions. Instead, it increases stress. It drains mental energy. And slowly, it makes problems appear larger than they actually are. From the brain's perspective, however, this behavior makes perfect sense. Human beings evolved in dangerous environments. Thousands of years ago, and paying close attention to potential threats helped people survive. If something looked dangerous, the brain needed to analyze it immediately. What is it? Is it a threat? How do I avoid it? The brain became extremely skilled at detecting problems. In fact, it became so skilled that it still behaves this way today. Even when the situation is not life-threatening, the mind can react as if it is. A small difficulty can feel enormous. A temporary setback can feel permanent. And the longer attention stays fixed on the problem, the more powerless a person begins to feel. But powerful thinkers do something very different. They understand a principle that many people overlook. Attention is a resource. Where you place it determines what grows inside your mind. If attention stays on the problem grows larger. And if attention shifts toward action, possibilities begin to appear. I once spoke with a small business owner who had gone through several difficult years. His company had experienced financial pressure, failed partnerships, and moments where the future felt uncertain. When I asked him how he managed to stay calm through all of that, he said something that stuck with me. If I stare at the problem too long, it becomes bigger in my head. He told me that early in his career, he used to panic whenever something went wrong. A mistake would happen and he would spend days worrying about it, thinking about the consequences, imagining everything that might collapse. But eventually he noticed something important. None of that worry ever solved the problem. It only made him exhausted. So he created a simple rule for himself, that whenever a problem appeared, he allowed himself a brief moment to acknowledge it. Then he forced his mind to ask a different question. What is the next thing I can do? Not the perfect solution, not the final answer, just the next possible step. Sometimes that step was small. A phone call, a conversation, a new idea. But those small steps did something powerful. They broke the mental trap. Instead of living inside the problem, his mind started moving toward solutions. And once that shift begins, the entire experience of difficulty changes. Because when the brain starts searching for action, it activates a completely different mental state. Curiosity replaces fear. Focus replaces panic. Movement replaces paralysis. This does not mean problems suddenly disappear. Life will always present challenges. Unexpected situations will always arise. But the way the mind interacts with those situations can transform completely. And that transformation begins with a simple awareness. The problem itself is rarely the trap. The real trap is the habit of staring at it for too long. Powerful minds understand this. They acknowledge problems quickly, but they refuse to live inside them. Instead, they train their attention to move forward. And when that shift happens, something subtle begins to change. What once looked like a wall slowly begins to reveal a doorway. Chapter 2. Why your brain automatically focuses on problems. Something fascinating happens inside the human mind when uncertainty appears. The brain immediately begins scanning for danger, not for solutions, for danger. This reaction is not a flaw in the mind. It is a survival mechanism that has existed for thousands of years. Long before modern cities, technology, and careers existed, human beings lived in environments where danger could appear at any moment. A strange sound in the distance, movement in the grass, a sudden change in the environment. If the brain ignored these signals, survival became unlikely. So the mind evolved to prioritize something very specific. Detect threats first, understand them later, solve them afterward. In other words, the brain is designed to notice problems before it notices possibilities. And even today, this ancient survival system still operates quietly in the background of our thinking. This is why negative events often feel stronger than positive ones. A person can receive 10 compliments in a day, but a single criticism can stay in their mind for hours, sometimes even days. The brain gives more attention to what might be dangerous. Psychologists often refer to this as negative bias. It simply means that the mind is naturally drawn toward problems, risks, and potential threats. This bias helped our ancestors survive. But in modern life, it can quietly distort the way we see reality. Because once the brain detects a problem, it begins searching for more evidence that the situation is bad. Thoughts start connecting with other thoughts. A small difficulty becomes linked with past failures. A temporary obstacle begins to look like a permanent pattern. And before long, the mind creates a story that feels much larger than the original situation. I once noticed this dynamic while speaking with someone who had recently lost an important opportunity at work. At first, the situation was simply disappointing, but within a few minutes of conversation, something interesting started happening. He began expanding the meaning of the event. This probably means my career isn't going anywhere. I always seem to miss the big opportunities. Maybe I'm just not good enough for this field. The original problem was one lost opportunity, but the mind quickly turned it into a much larger narrative. One moment became an entire identity. And this happens more often than people realize. The brain is not only detecting problems, it is also creating explanations around them. Stories that make the situation feel more personal, more permanent, and more threatening. But powerful thinkers learn to interrupt this process. They recognize that the brain's first reaction is not always the most accurate one. It is simply the fastest one. And speed is not the same thing as truth. I remember a mentor once explaining this idea in a very simple way. He said, "Your brain's first interpretation is usually emotional. Your second interpretation can be intelligent." That distinction is incredibly important, because the first reaction is often driven by survival instincts, fear, uncertainty, defensiveness. But when the mind slows down, a different kind of thinking becomes possible. The rational part of the brain begins to activate. And once that happens, the situation often looks very different. Instead of seeing a disaster, the mind begins seeing details. Instead of imagining the worst outcome, it begins asking practical questions. What exactly happened? What parts of the situation can be changed? What options still exist? This shift is small but powerful, because it moves the mind away from emotional reaction and towards strategic thinking. And the people who develop this habit gain a quiet advantage in life. They still notice problems, but they do not immediately surrender their thinking to them. They create a small gap between the event and their interpretation of it. Inside that gap, something powerful happens. Clarity begins to appear. One of the most interesting things about the human brain is that attention shapes perception. What you repeatedly focus on begins to dominate your experience of reality. If the mind constantly searches for threats, the world begins to feel full of danger. If the mind constantly searches for opportunities, the world begins to reveal possibilities. Both realities exist at the same time, but the brain can only focus on one direction at a time. This is why some people seem to move through difficult situations with remarkable clarity. They are not ignoring problems. They are simply refusing to let the brain's first reaction control the entire story. They allow the initial alarm signal to pass. Then they begin asking better questions, and better questions lead to better thinking, which eventually leads to better outcomes. The brain may be naturally wired to focus on problems, but with awareness and practice, that wiring can begin to change. Because the moment you understand how this mechanism works, something subtle begins to happen. You start noticing your own thoughts more clearly. You begin recognizing when the mind is exaggerating a situation. You begin catching the moment when a small difficulty is about to become a much larger mental storm. And once you can see that moment clearly, you gain something incredibly valuable: the ability to choose a different direction for your attention. Instead of being pulled deeper into the problem, your mind begins searching for the path forward. Chapter 3. Calm minds solve problems faster than smart minds. In difficult situations, many people believe intelligence is the most important advantage. The smartest person in the room should be the one who solves the problem. But real life often shows something very different. When pressure rises, intelligence alone is not always enough. Because the real enemy in difficult moments is not the problem itself. It is panic. When the brain enters a state of panic, something very interesting happens inside the mind. The part of the brain responsible for logical thinking begins to slow down. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as amygdala hijack. The emotional system of the brain suddenly takes control. The body becomes tense. Breathing becomes faster. Attention narrows. And instead of thinking clearly, the mind shifts into survival mode, as this reaction helped humans survive in dangerous environments. If a wild animal appeared thousands of years ago, there was no time for long analysis. The body needed to react immediately: fight, run, or freeze. But in modern life, most of the problems we face are not physical threats. They are mental challenges, deadlines, unexpected changes, difficult decisions, complex situations that require calm thinking. And when panic takes control, something ironic happens. Even very intelligent people can begin making poor decisions. I once witnessed this during an intense meeting where a team was facing a serious problem. A critical system had suddenly stopped working, and the pressure was enormous. Deadlines were approaching. Clients were waiting. Everyone in the room knew that a mistake could have serious consequences. At first, the discussion was calm. But as the minutes passed, the tension increased. People began speaking faster. Voices became louder. Different ideas started competing with each other. Soon the room felt chaotic. Everyone was trying to fix the problem at the same time. Ironically, the more people tried to think quickly, the more confused the situation became. Then something interesting happened. One person in the room, who had said very little until that point, leaned back in his chair. He didn't interrupt anyone. He simply observed the situation quietly. After a moment, he said something that immediately changed the atmosphere. "Let's slow down for a second." The room became silent. Then he asked a simple question. "What exactly is the first problem we need to solve?" That question changed the entire direction of the conversation. And instead of trying to solve everything at once, the team began focusing on one small part of the issue. Within minutes, the confusion began to disappear. Clarity returned. Solutions started emerging. Later, someone asked that person why he stayed so calm while everyone else felt stressed. His answer was surprisingly simple. When people rush, they stop seeing clearly. That idea reveals something powerful about the human mind. Calmness creates clarity, and clarity allows intelligence to function properly. Without calmness, even the smartest mind can become overwhelmed. But when the mind slows down, something remarkable happens. The brain regains access to its full ability to analyze, connect ideas, and make decisions. This is why many experienced leaders appear unusually calm in difficult situations. It is not because they lack emotion. It is because they understand that emotional chaos destroys clear thinking. One mentor once explained this idea using a simple metaphor. He said, "The mind is like water. When water is disturbed, the surface becomes chaotic. You cannot see what lies beneath it, but when the water becomes still, everything becomes visible. The same thing happens inside the mind. When thoughts are racing and emotions are intense, perception becomes distorted. But when the mind becomes calm, patterns begin to appear. And those patterns often reveal the path forward." One of the most fascinating things about calm thinking is that it is not simply a personality trait. It is a trained response. Some people develop this ability through experience. After facing many difficult situations, they learn that panic rarely improves anything. Others train this ability intentionally. They practice pausing before reacting. They learn to breathe slowly during stressful moments. They develop the habit of asking questions instead of making immediate judgments. And over time, this habit becomes automatic. The mind learns that calmness is not weakness. It is a strategic advantage. Think about the moments in life when clear decisions matter most. A difficult conversation, a sudden problem at work, an unexpected crisis. In those moments, the person who reacts emotionally often loses control of the situation. But the person who remains calm gains something powerful: perspective. And perspective allows the brain to organize information more effectively. Instead of seeing chaos, the mind begins separating the situation into smaller parts. What exactly happened? What can be controlled? What action should come first? These questions transform confusion into direction. Another interesting observation about calm minds is how they influence other people. When one person remains composed during a stressful moment, others often begin to relax as well. Calmness spreads, just like panic spreads. This is why strong leaders often focus first on controlling their own emotional state, because the emotional tone of a group is often set by the calmest person in the room. And once calmness enters the situation, something important becomes possible: clear thinking. This is why intelligence alone is not enough to solve complex problems. Intelligence is a powerful tool, but calmness is what allows that tool to work properly. Without calmness, intelligence becomes scattered. With calmness, intelligence becomes precise. And when the mind learns to remain steady in difficult moments, a powerful shift begins to occur. Situations that once felt overwhelming begin to look different. Instead of chaos, the mind sees structure. Instead of pressure, the mind sees possibilities. And slowly, the ability to stay calm becomes one of the greatest advantages a person can develop. Because in the end, difficult situations do not reward the fastest mind. They reward the clearest one. Chapter 4. The Shift That Turns. Every problem into information, something subtle separates people who grow stronger through difficulty from those who feel defeated by it. It is not luck, it is not intelligence, it is perspective. More specifically, it is the way the mind interprets problems. For many people, a problem immediately feels personal. Something went wrong, something failed, something didn't work the way it was supposed to, and the mind reacts emotionally. This shouldn't have happened. This is a setback. This is bad. But there is another way of looking at problems that powerful thinkers slowly learn over time. Instead of seeing problems as personal attacks or failures, they begin seeing them as information. At first, this idea sounds strange. After all, problems often bring frustration, disappointment, and stress. But when the emotional reaction fades, every problem contains something valuable: data, feedback, signals about what is working and what isn't. I once heard a story from someone who had spent years building a small startup. In the early days, one of their biggest products failed almost immediately after launch. The idea looked promising. The team had invested time and money into development. They were confident it would succeed. But once the product reached customers, the response was disappointing. People simply weren't interested. For the team, it felt like a serious setback. Weeks of work had produced almost nothing, and in the beginning, the reaction was emotional: frustration, confusion, doubt. But after the initial disappointment passed, something interesting happened. Instead of abandoning the project completely, they started analyzing what the failure was trying to teach them. Why didn't customers respond? What assumptions were wrong? What did people actually want instead? The more they examined the situation, the more information the failure revealed. It showed them gaps in their understanding. It revealed flaws in the design. It exposed things they had overlooked. And once they saw that information clearly, they were able to adjust their strategy. The next version of their product was built using everything they had learned from the first failure. That version succeeded. What looked like a setback had quietly become a guide. This is one of the most powerful mental shifts a person can develop. When something goes wrong, the instinctive reaction is emotional. But when the mind begins asking better questions, the situation changes. As instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" the mind begins asking, "What is this situation trying to show me?" That question transforms frustration into curiosity, and curiosity is far more useful than frustration, because curiosity activates the problem-solving parts of the brain. It encourages exploration, it invites new perspectives, and it allows mistakes to become sources of improvement. One mentor once explained this idea in a very simple way. He said, "Every result in life is feedback, not failure." Feedback. If something works, the feedback is clear. Continue. If something doesn't work, the feedback is equally clear. Adjust. But the moment a person labels a problem as a personal defeat, learning often stops. The mind becomes defensive. It focuses on protecting the ego rather than understanding the situation. Powerful thinkers take a different approach. They detach their identity from the outcome. A mistake does not mean they are incapable. A setback does not mean the future is hopeless. It simply means new information has appeared, and information can be used. Consider how scientists approach experiments. When an experiment fails, they do not immediately see it as a disaster. They see it as data. Something did not work, but that result reveals something important about the system they are studying. Each unsuccessful attempt removes one incorrect assumption, and slowly, through observation and adjustment, a better understanding begins to emerge. Life works in a very similar way. Every challenge reveals something about reality. Every obstacle contains clues about what needs to change. But those clues only become visible when the mind moves beyond emotional reaction. This is why calm thinking, which we explored in the previous chapter, is so important. Without calmness, the brain sees only frustration. With calmness, the brain begins to notice patterns, and patterns reveal direction. Another interesting effect happens when people begin viewing problems as information. Fear begins to shrink, because information is not something to avoid. Information is something to use. When a difficulty becomes data, it loses some of its emotional weight. It becomes part of a process rather than a personal failure. Many successful people quietly adopt this mindset. When something goes wrong, they do not immediately judge the situation. Instead, they observe. What happened? Why did it happen? What can be learned from it? This shift transforms the relationship between the mind and difficulty. Problems no longer feel like walls blocking progress. They become signals pointing toward improvement. And once the mind begins seeing the world this way, something remarkable happens. Every experience becomes useful. Success provides confirmation. Failure provides direction. And over time, the accumulation of those lessons creates something powerful. Wisdom. Because wisdom is not simply knowledge, it is the ability to interpret experience correctly. And the people who develop that ability eventually reach a surprising realization. Every obstacle in life carries two possibilities. It can either become a reason to stop, or it can become information that shows the next way forward. The difference between those two outcomes depends entirely on how the mind chooses to see it. Chapter 5. The Stoic Rule. Focus only on what you can control. One of the most powerful mental shifts a person can develop begins with a surprisingly simple realization. Many of the things people worry about every day are things they cannot control. The weather, other people's opinions, unexpected events, economic conditions, past mistakes, future uncertainties. Yet the mind spends an enormous amount of energy thinking about them. It replays situations that have already happened. It imagines scenarios that might never happen. And while this mental effort feels important, it rarely produces any useful result. Instead, it drains attention, it drains emotional energy, and it quietly increases stress. Centuries ago, Stoic philosophers noticed this pattern in human behavior. They observed that people often suffer not because of events themselves, but because of how they think about those events. So they introduced a powerful principle that still remains relevant today: the dichotomy of control. It is a simple idea. Some things are within your control, other things are not. And clarity begins when you learn to separate the two. At first, this may seem obvious, but when you begin applying it to everyday life, the impact becomes remarkable. Imagine a difficult situation at work. A project fails. A client becomes unhappy. A decision made by someone else affects your plans. The natural reaction is often frustration. Why did this happen? Why didn't they handle it differently? Why is the situation so unfair? But if you look carefully at those questions, something becomes clear. They are focused entirely on things outside your control. You cannot change the past. You cannot force another person to think differently. You cannot instantly change external circumstances, yet the mind keeps returning to these things as if they can somehow be fixed through thought alone. This is where the Stoic perspective becomes powerful. Instead of asking why the situation happened, the Stoic mindset asks a different question. What part of this situation is actually within my control? Sometimes the answer is small. Your response, your next action, your attitude toward the challenge. But those small areas of control are often far more powerful than they first appear, because action always exists inside that circle. I once spoke with someone who had experienced a serious professional setback, and a project he had spent years building suddenly collapsed due to factors completely outside his influence. A partner withdrew unexpectedly. Funding disappeared. The entire plan fell apart within weeks. Naturally, the situation was painful. For a while, he spent days replaying everything that had happened, thinking about how unfair the outcome was, imagining how things could have been different, but eventually he realized something important. No amount of thinking about the past would change what had already happened. So he began shifting his attention towards something else. What could he control now? He couldn't recover the lost investment immediately, but he could control how he responded to the situation. He could reach out to new partners. He could analyze what went wrong. He could rebuild. Slowly, and the energy that once fueled frustration began fueling progress. And over time, that shift created a completely new opportunity. What changed was not the past. What changed was where his attention was placed. This is why the Stoic rule is so powerful. It protects the mind from wasting energy. Instead of scattering attention across things that cannot be influenced, it concentrates energy on what can actually move forward. Imagine your mental energy as a limited resource. Every day, you have a certain amount of attention available. When that attention is spent worrying about uncontrollable situations, very little remains for meaningful action. But when attention is focused on controllable factors, the mind becomes far more effective. Decisions become clearer. Effort becomes more productive. Progress becomes possible. And one of the most interesting effects of this mindset is how it reduces anxiety. Anxiety often grows from uncertainty. The mind tries to predict every possible outcome. It imagines risks. It tries to prepare for every scenario. But when the mind learns to focus only on controllable actions, uncertainty loses much of its power. Because the question becomes simple. What can I do right now? Not tomorrow, not next year. Right now. This question immediately moves attention away from fear and toward action. And action has a powerful psychological effect. It restores a sense of agency. Instead of feeling trapped by circumstances, a person begins feeling capable again. This is why many Stoic thinkers believe that emotional resilience begins with clarity about control. Marcus Aurelius once wrote about this idea in a very practical way. He reminded himself repeatedly that external events are not entirely within our influence, but our judgment about them always is. This idea changes the way difficulties are experienced. When something unexpected happens, the mind has two choices. It can resist reality, or it can work with it. Resistance often leads to frustration, but acceptance creates space for strategy. Accepting reality does not mean approving of it. It simply means recognizing the situation clearly enough to act intelligently. If a storm appears during a journey, fighting the weather will not stop the rain, but adjusting the route might still move the traveler forward. Life works in a similar way. Many circumstances cannot be controlled, but responses always can be. Those responses often shape outcomes far more than people realize. Another powerful benefit of focusing on what you can control is that it strengthens discipline. Every time attention shifts away from frustration and toward action, the mind reinforces a productive habit. Over time, that habit becomes automatic. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, the mind begins asking constructive questions. What can be improved? What step should come next? What action moves things forward? These questions keep the mind engaged with progress instead of paralysis. And the more consistently this mindset is practiced, the stronger it becomes. Situations that once felt overwhelming begin to look different. Instead of seeing chaos, the mind sees structure. Instead of feeling powerless, the mind sees options. And gradually, something remarkable begins to happen. The world may remain unpredictable, but the mind becomes steady because it understands a simple truth. Peace does not come from controlling everything. It comes from focusing your energy only where it matters. Chapter 6. The problem-solving framework used by high performers. When people watch highly successful individuals solve difficult problems, it often appears effortless. They seem calm. They move quickly. They make decisions that look obvious in hindsight. From the outside, it can look like they simply think faster than everyone else. But in reality, something else is happening. They are not thinking faster. They are thinking more clearly. And one of the reasons clarity appears is because experienced problem solvers rarely approach challenges in a chaotic way. They use structure. Structure is one of the most underrated advantages in difficult situations. Without structure, the mind tries to solve everything at once. It jumps between possibilities. It imagines different outcomes. It becomes overwhelmed by the size of the situation. But when thinking becomes structured, something powerful happens. Complex problems begin to shrink. Because they are no longer one giant obstacle, they become a series of smaller questions. I once observed this during a conversation with someone who had spent years managing large teams and difficult projects. One day I asked him how he stayed calm when situations became complicated. His answer was simple. I never tried to solve the entire problem at once. At first, that response seemed obvious, but the more he explained, the more interesting his approach became. Whenever a difficult situation appeared, he followed a consistent mental process. First, he tried to understand the situation as clearly as possible. What exactly happened? Not assumptions, not emotional reactions, just the facts. This step alone often removes a surprising amount of confusion. Because when people feel stressed, their interpretation of events can become exaggerated. The situation feels larger than it really is. But when the facts are separated from the emotional noise, the problem becomes easier to see. The second step was identifying the real problem. This may sound simple, but it is often where people make mistakes. Many situations contain several visible difficulties, but only one core issue. Without identifying that core issue, people can waste enormous effort solving the wrong problem. For example, imagine a team missing an important deadline. At first glance, the problem appears to be time, but after closer examination, the real issue might be communication, or unclear expectations, or inefficient processes. If the wrong problem is addressed, the same situation will eventually return. But once the real issue becomes clear, the path forward begins to appear. The third step was breaking the situation into smaller parts. Large problems often feel overwhelming because they appear as a single massive challenge. But when divided into smaller pieces, they become manageable. Instead of asking, "How do we fix everything?" the mind begins asking, "What is the first step? What is the next step? What is the smallest action that moves this situation forward?" These questions transform pressure into progress, because the brain responds much better to clear actions than vague worries. The fourth step involved exploring possible solutions. At this stage, creativity becomes useful. Different options are considered. Different strategies are imagined. And sometimes the best answer is not the most obvious one, but this stage works effectively only after the previous steps are completed. Without understanding the situation clearly, creative solutions often miss the target. Finally, the last step was action. Even the most elegant plan means nothing if it never leaves the mind. Action is the bridge between thinking and progress. Sometimes the first attempt does not work perfectly, but action produces feedback, and feedback produces learning, which leads to better decisions. What makes this framework powerful is not its complexity, it is its clarity. Understand the situation, identify the real problem, break it into smaller pieces, explore solutions, take action. This process prevents the mind from becoming trapped in confusion. Instead of reacting emotionally, it creates direction. And when direction gives the brain something incredibly valuable. Momentum. Momentum changes how problems feel. Without momentum, difficulties appear heavy and immovable. But once small steps begin producing progress, confidence grows. The mind becomes more willing to face challenges. Another interesting aspect of structured thinking is that it reduces overthinking. Overthinking often occurs when the mind tries to solve everything simultaneously. It jumps from one possibility to another without reaching a decision. But structure creates boundaries for thinking. Each step has a purpose. Each question has a direction. Instead of endless analysis, the mind moves forward, step by step. High performers in many different fields rely on similar mental frameworks. Athletes break performance down into specific actions. Engineers divide large projects into stages. Doctors analyze symptoms before prescribing treatment. In every case, structure transforms complexity into clarity. But there is another subtle benefit to this approach. It protects emotional stability. When a person knows how they will approach a problem, the mind feels less threatened by uncertainty. Instead of feeling lost, it has a process. And processes create confidence, not because they guarantee perfect outcomes, but because they provide direction when situations become unclear. This is why experienced leaders often appear composed even when facing difficult decisions. They trust their thinking process. They understand that problems can be examined, divided, and addressed step by step. And this trust allows them to stay calm, because they know that even if the solution is not immediately visible, the path toward it can still be discovered. Over time, practicing structured thinking changes the way the mind approaches challenges. Instead of seeing problems as overwhelming obstacles, the brain begins to see them as puzzles. And puzzles invite curiosity. Curiosity replaces fear. Clarity replaces chaos. And once that shift happens, difficult situations lose much of their psychological weight. They become something that can be explored, understood, and eventually solved. Because in the end, powerful problem solvers do not rely on speed alone. They rely on a way of thinking that turns complexity into clarity. And clarity is often the first step toward every meaningful solution. Chapter 7. Training your brain to automatically look for solutions. Most people believe that the way they think is simply the way they are. They assume their mindset is fixed. Some people are naturally optimistic. Others are naturally anxious. Some people are problem solvers. Others feel overwhelmed by difficulties. But modern neuroscience reveals something incredibly important about the human brain. The brain is not fixed. It is adaptable. It changes based on how it is used. Scientists call this ability neuroplasticity. Every time you repeat a thought pattern, the brain strengthens the neural pathways connected to that pattern. In simple terms, the brain becomes better at whatever it practices, most often. If someone spends years focusing on problems, their brain becomes extremely efficient at detecting problems. Small obstacles immediately attract attention. Risks are noticed quickly. Possible failures appear everywhere. But if someone consistently trains their mind to look for solutions, something different happens. Their brain begins searching for opportunities automatically. Possibilities appear faster. Creative ideas become easier to access, and challenges begin to feel less threatening. This change does not happen overnight, but it happens through repetition. One of the most effective ways to understand this process is to think of the brain as a path through a forest. The first time someone walks through the forest, there is no clear trail. They must push through branches and tall grass. The path is difficult to follow, but if that same route is walked every day, something interesting happens. The grass begins to flatten, and the branches move aside. The trail becomes easier to see. Eventually, the path becomes obvious. Thought patterns work in a similar way. When the mind repeatedly follows the same mental route, that route becomes easier to travel. This is why some people instinctively react with worry. Their brain has walked that path thousands of times. But new mental paths can always be created. And one of the most powerful habits a person can build is the habit of asking better questions. Questions guide attention, and attention shapes thinking. Imagine two people facing the same unexpected problem. One person immediately asks, "Why does this always happen to me?" That question directs the mind toward frustration. It invites memories of past failures. It encourages self-doubt. But another person might ask a very different question. What is the opportunity hidden inside this situation? That question sends the brain in a completely different direction. Instead of searching for blame, it searches for possibilities. Over time, these questions begin shaping how the brain interprets challenges. One of the most interesting things about solution-oriented thinking is that it does not ignore problems. Instead, it treats them as starting points. A problem becomes the beginning of a process, rather than the end of one. I once spoke with someone who had experienced several business failures early in his career. At first, each failure felt devastating. He questioned his abilities. He wondered if he had chosen the wrong path. But after years of experience, something in his mindset began to shift. When something went wrong, he stopped asking, "Why did this fail?" Instead, he asked, "What is this situation trying to teach me?" That small change transformed the way he experienced setbacks. Failures no longer felt like personal defeats. They felt like lessons, and lessons contain value. This mindset gradually trained his brain to see information instead of frustration. Eventually, he noticed something remarkable. Situations that once felt overwhelming began to look like puzzles, and puzzles invite curiosity. Curiosity activates creativity. Creativity leads to new ideas, and new ideas often reveal solutions that were invisible at first. Another powerful habit that strengthens solution-focused thinking is practicing small daily challenges. Every time the brain successfully solves a problem, it builds confidence. Confidence reinforces the belief that difficulties can be handled, and this belief influences how future challenges are perceived. For example, imagine someone encountering an unexpected obstacle during a project. If their past experiences are filled with moments where they successfully found solutions, their brain immediately remembers those victories. It says, "I have solved difficult things before." That memory creates psychological strength. Instead of feeling trapped, the mind feels capable. But if someone rarely practices problem solving and spends most of their time worrying, their brain remembers something different. It remembers stress, it remembers frustration, and it expects similar outcomes. This is why intentional mental training is so powerful. Each time you face a difficulty and ask, "What can I do next?" you strengthen the neural pathway connected to action. Each time you pause instead of panicking, you strengthen the pathway connected to calm thinking. Each time you search for possibilities instead of blame, you strengthen the pathway connected to creativity. Over time, these patterns become automatic. The brain begins responding differently without conscious effort. Another fascinating aspect of neuroplasticity is how quickly the brain can adapt when new habits are practiced consistently. Studies have shown that repeated thought patterns can begin reshaping neural connections in a matter of weeks. This means that the mindset someone has today is not permanent. It is simply the result of past mental habits, and those habits can always change. But training the mind requires patience. So just like physical exercise strengthens muscles gradually, mental training strengthens thinking patterns slowly. At first, it may feel unnatural to redirect attention toward solutions. The brain may still prefer its familiar paths. But with repetition, the new path becomes easier. Eventually, it becomes the brain's default direction. And when that happens, something remarkable begins to occur. Challenges no longer trigger immediate stress. Instead, they trigger curiosity. The mind begins asking, what can be done here? What option haven't I considered yet? What small action moves this situation forward? These questions keep the brain engaged with progress instead of fear. And over time, the habit of solution-oriented thinking becomes one of the most powerful tools a person can develop, because life will always present uncertainty, and unexpected situations will always appear. But when the brain learns to automatically search for solutions, those situations no longer feel like threats. They become opportunities to think, adapt, and grow. And slowly, the mind begins transforming into something incredibly resilient. A mind that does not run from problems, but quietly looks for the way through them. Chapter 8. Becoming the person who always finds the way. There is a certain type of person people naturally look toward when things go wrong. When situations become difficult, when confusion fills the room, when everyone feels uncertain about what to do next. Someone quietly steps forward. They do not panic. They do not complain. They do not become overwhelmed by the size of the problem. Instead, they begin asking questions. They begin examining the situation. They begin searching for the next step forward. And over time, people begin to trust these individuals, not because they always have perfect answers, but because they have developed something far more valuable, a mindset that refuses to remain stuck. Becoming this type of person is not about having a life without problems. In fact, it often comes from facing many of them. Difficult experiences teach the mind something powerful. They reveal that challenges are not rare events. They are part of the human journey. Careers face setbacks. Relationships experience tension. Plans change unexpectedly. And the people who learn to navigate these moments successfully develop a different relationship with difficulty. They stop asking, "Why is this happening?" And they begin asking, "What is the best way forward?" I once met someone who had built a reputation for solving complicated problems inside a large organization. Whenever a project became difficult, people often turned to him for guidance. At first, I assumed he must possess extraordinary technical knowledge. But after speaking with him for a while, I realized something surprising. His advantage was not just expertise, it was his attitude toward problems. And he told me that early in his career, he reacted to setbacks just like many other people. When things went wrong, he felt frustrated, sometimes even discouraged. But over time, he noticed something important. Complaining never improved the situation, neither did blaming circumstances. Those reactions only consumed energy. Eventually, he began practicing a different approach. Whenever a challenge appeared, he paused for a moment and asked himself a simple question: what is the next useful step? Not the perfect solution, not the final outcome, just the next useful step. That small question changed the way he approached every problem. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by complexity, he focused on progress. And progress, even when small, builds momentum. Momentum changes how the mind experiences difficulty. When people feel stuck, problems appear enormous. But once movement begins, even small movement, confidence begins to grow. Another interesting thing happens when someone develops this mindset. They become less afraid of uncertainty. Many people fear uncertain situations because they believe uncertainty means danger. But experienced problem solvers understand something different. Uncertainty simply means the full picture has not appeared yet. Information is still emerging, and information can always be used. This perspective creates a quiet confidence. Instead of fearing the unknown, the mind becomes curious about it. Curiosity opens the door to exploration. Exploration leads to discovery, and discovery often reveals solutions that were invisible at first. Over time, the habit of looking for the next step becomes automatic. The mind no longer freezes when facing a challenge. It begins working. examining, experimenting, adjusting. This is why some people seem remarkably resilient, even in difficult situations. Their resilience does not come from avoiding problems. It comes from knowing how to move through them. One of the most powerful aspects of this mindset is that it influences the people around you. When someone reacts calmly during a difficult moment, it changes the emotional atmosphere of the entire group. Panic begins to settle. People begin thinking more clearly. Hope begins to replace confusion. Leadership often begins with this emotional stability, not loud authority, not dramatic speeches, just the quiet ability to remain focused when others feel lost. But becoming this type of person requires practice. It begins with small everyday situations, and a mistake, a delay, an unexpected inconvenience. Each moment becomes an opportunity to train the mind. Instead of reacting automatically, you pause, you observe, you ask a better question. What can be done here? Sometimes the answer is immediate. Sometimes it requires patience. But every time the mind chooses action instead of frustration, a powerful habit is reinforced. Gradually, this habit shapes